Today my sharing is on Dlt Ci Cd Practices. We're a bit different from most teams because we don't have like production databases, not really. We have some state storage, but not like a full-on like deployment. So like other teams, they have like entire infrastructures in AWS and all that. So they probably use like Terraform and Docker and all that, right? So we're a bit more lightweight, right? So, but roughly the principles are the same. Right, so the principles we would like to have is that it's completely automated. Right, we don't want you to have to go and click a button to start everything or to approve something, because then it becomes very painful. Like when you do stuff, it just takes forever to get all the approvals you need. Right, and we want it to be repeatable. Right, I mean this is just nice to have, so that if there's if something fails, it fails consistently, right? We don't want things to fail sometimes and not sometimes, because that's annoying. We try that. I mean, we don't always achieve that, but try, right? Revertible, what is this? This is so that, if a deployment, we find out that there's a bug, a critical bug sometimes in any of our deploys, we can revert it at any time, right? So like, you just click a button and go back to the previous one. So it's not like too crazy, right? Because if we always try to have functioning builds, then it means that at any time we can revert and then get on with our weekend and exit when we start work. We don't have to like, rush to fix things in the middle of the night or on the weekend, right? So that's nice. Fast turnaround is obvious. I think the other day we had some vulnerability and we fixed and deployed it in less than half an hour. I think it was like 15 minutes actually. So that is nice. And also when you have this kind of fast feedback, then you're a bit less scared to commit, a bit less scared to merge stuff, which has good implications, right? And of course, importantly, we don't want to deploy just anything. We want to have automated quality checks. So I'll talk about some of these in the next part. Right. So roughly, we have two platforms for our CI/CD. We started with what's it called? Travis, right? Travis used to be free. Then they became not free. So we moved over to Circle CI also because Travis was quite buggy sometimes. So now we are a bit stuck between GitHub Actions and Circle. Some of our repos use Circle, some use GitHub Actions. Right, so for example,
there are still some repo with Travis, just for information.
Really? Oh dear. They still work?
Yes.
Interesting.
But it's a pain.
Okay, we should probably fix that at some point. Right. Anyway, so yeah, so actually for the interns, if you're not familiar with like what CI/CD is, like basically it means you run a process, right? When you commit code, you run a process. Then after this process is done, this code shows up somewhere, either in like a preview deploy, which is something that we have that is very nice, or in production, right? So it's a series of steps basically to get stuff from your pull request to deploy, right? So yeah, back to that. So GitHub Actions, usually you can find the workflows in here. So I'm going to go over an example of one of our websites. So this is TradeTrust website. We have a few different kinds of CI for different kinds of repos. So this is a website one. And we use, for this one particularly, we have GitHub Actions. This is TradeTrust website, right? So the steps we have generally, lint. What's lint? Lint is like prettier and ESLint. Generally, it's like static checking, right? You just want to check the code, make sure things are according to some rules, right? So we have some, in particular, there's like ESLint and that's prettier. What's prettier? Prettier is something that is a general set of rules for formatting, code formatting. So it's only formatting. It's not like it's different from ESLint. So we use this because we don't want people to argue about how many spacing we should have, how many tabs we should have, how many indentation, when to split your line and all that stuff, right? We just have that automated. Nobody can argue with that, right? We don't want to bother that and put in code review because it's not worth the time. So we just go with prettier for pretty much all our repos, right? Because we use JavaScript and TypeScript everywhere, so that works. Besides prettier, we also have ESLint. So ESLint is another set of rules for ensuring that you don't do bad things in your code. For example, using globals. I believe that's probably a lint rule for them, right? If there isn't, there should be. Right? Things like that, right? Best practices, right? Because sometimes, JavaScript is not very safe. You can write things that cause you trouble down the road that you don't realize. Okay, so that's lint rules, so like static checking. And then we build it. In this repo, okay, actually, let me highlight the lines. So earlier I said lint, right? Lint. So this is where the lint is run, right? The command is npm run lint. Okay. Then the next one is build. In this case, it's test first, build first. It does this order doesn't like specifically matter because all of it needs to pass, right? So why do we run build? We want to make sure that it can build successfully, right? Because if it doesn't build successfully, you have nothing to deploy. Okay, all right. So that's why we run build. Build also does TypeScript type checks, right? So that happens in here as well. And after that, we run our test suites. So all our repos should have tests at various levels. We have our unit test, which is usually run by Jest, right? So that's the unit test. And then we go to more complicated tests like integration test and end-to-end test, UI test. So in this case, Jest runs the first two and maybe the E2E. I don't know if this one has E2E. I think it does, right? And then we have a UI test with Test Cafe and Debug. Right? So I'm not going to go into the specifics of these testing libraries, but just let you know that they are what they do. Right? So then after all this is done, we do a deploy. Right? So for this particular CI script, that you don't see a deploy step yet. Right? That's because that's handled by another of our platforms, which is it's done by Netlify, right? So usually you can see, for example, for a pull request here, this is the GitHub action that was run, right? It was successful, the green tick. And then a whole bunch of other tests. These are all Netlify stuff, right? So Netlify is a platform for deploying static websites. Static websites means that there is no database involved, right? It's just a bunch of HTML and JavaScript and CSS, right? So there's no infrastructure, it all runs on the client side, and that's something Netlify provides. So for all our website repos, it's all deployed via Netlify, right? So once actually it runs concurrently, the CI lint and Netlify runs at the same time, right? And then you get a deploy preview, right? Once Netlify is done building and publishing, right? So what's a deploy preview? I think all of you should already know this, but just show you. All right, deploy preview is a preview of the build, right? So you can see this is not the actual URL, right? Not the tradetrust.io URL. This is a preview website. So this differs from the regular website because it contains all the changes that was inside this pull request, right? And it should work as normal. And generally, they point to Robston. So we have a few different what you call backend, right? So for Ethereum, we have a few networks. There's mainnet, there's Robston, there's Rinkeby. So Robston and Rinkeby are test nets. So usually our preview deploys point to Robston. We have one for Rinkeby also, but that's not the one that we maintain usually. We try to keep it up to date, right? So that's Netlify. Netlify looks like this. This is the Netlify login, right? So you need an account for this. I think we have limits on how many accounts we have, so we don't give it to just everyone because you have to pay per seat. And usually people don't have to come in here to figure out what's going on. It usually just works. Right. So Netlify has build settings, right? So you can see the build command here is npm run build, which is the same as what we have in our CI. So if that one fails, this one will fail as well, right? And then it publishes to this, and then whatever's in this is hosted at the URL, right? So earlier I talked about reverting stuff, right? So you can see that if we go back to the site, okay, we go to deploys. Right, over here is a list of all the deploys that has happened recently. You can see the dates and times, right? And then what can we do with this? we can actually revert. So from production, this is the currently published production. We can actually revert if we want to. Oh shit, I just went to the URL. So again, if I click publish deploy here, master will redirect back to this build, right? Instead of what is currently there. So this is for Netlify, right? Which is quite nice. So like anytime, we've had to do it very rarely, once in a while, right? If we need to revert a build, we just do that. And then we fix the problem. Unless the problem is not fixed by reverting, then we kacau a bit, right? Okay, so yes, this is for Netlify. Any questions for Netlify? Okay, no questions. Okay, so this is Netlify is for static websites, right? So another thing we have.
Hold on, RG. I think Boon has a question.
Boon has a question on Telegram.
I think he's asking to repeat the section about reverting. How do you revert? Okay.
Oh, the question is how to revert, or is it what is revert? Boon? Boon is not talking. But
Oh, I was talking in the chat.
oh, okay. Do you need me to clarify, or is that okay?
No, it's okay.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So that's Netlify. Right. Where was I? Yeah. So that's one. That's our front end platform. Right. So let's talk about if we have stuff like our lambdas and all that, right? So that's deployed on a different platform. It's called C.Run. Right. So let's look at one repo that has this C.Run. So for example, the repo that I'm looking at is OA functions. Right. So this repo has I think 3 lambdas in it, 3 AWS lambdas. Right? So these are like APIs, right? If you're not familiar with, and usually it works well. All our APIs work on serverless framework, right? So over here you see a serverless.yaml for this service and blah blah blah, right? And then we deploy this using C.Run, which runs here. So C.Run also has preview deploys, right? So like, actually, let me see if we have any. So this failed, so probably they didn't build fine. Let's look at something that succeeded. Oh, but the URLs won't be working on because it's cleaned up after merge. Yeah, I don't have a URL to see. Okay, here. So if it's been deployed, it shows. I think you can actually click on this. Yeah, but this brings you to the console, not the actual URL. Okay. Anyway, for C.Run, we have a login for this. Usually share it among the GovTech people because this actually has access to the AWS account, our GovTech AWS account, so we can just give it out to everyone. Right. Yeah, so it also has preview deploys. You can see this is the deploy history for this pull request. So every pull request gets its own deploy as well. And this one failed, and you can see how it failed. All right, so this repo is a bit special. It has like 3 different serverless services, and then there's a post-deploy step. So in each service, what happens is it builds, it runs its tests. Okay, so this was skipped. Right, so this is what it looks like. Right, it runs its test, build, and deploy. You can expand whatever by clicking. I don't know what's in there, so I don't want to show you. In case there are any secrets. Right, and post deploy runs a integration test. Right, and then you can see what failed here. Okay, so that's C.Run. I will talk a little bit more about the serverless framework, how to work with it, because it's a bit more complicated than the static websites. Static websites generally quite simple. It's just a React website. You npm run tests, and it does its thing. It's quite simple. Okay, so I'm going to cover like the templates first, and then we'll get back to the serverless framework. Any questions on C.Run?
No questions from me so far.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we have a few different template repos. The first one is under my name because I actually made it for personal use and then we started using it in the team. That's why it's maintained by me. It's this repo that I actually forked from another guy. Right, the original name was just NOD, right? So this is the original, but it's pre-configured stuff that is not the same, slightly different from like what we use. So I changed some of the stuff. I didn't change the name. I probably should. It's not very nice to use his name, but I never got around to it. So this is a boilerplate that we use for our libraries. So like stuff you want to publish to npm to use in other of our apps, right? So it's quite straightforward. You can either copy, paste, or you can clone it, right? And then you just change whatever you need to change. Like for example, the library name, everything in the stuff in package JSON. You want to change the author and all that, right? So you do that. It's funny because I didn't change this author. Right, and then the scripts here are stuff that we generally already should be quite familiar with, on the test lint build, right? So it has some nice things. It has Babel already set up, so you can use polyfills and all that. We use this npm library called Debug. This is for logging. That is inside utilities, I think. Right. So there are examples of how to use this, right? Don't have to go into too much detail. It has Jest, it has ESLint, Prettier. It's also set up with TypeScript. And it has Circle CI. There are instructions on how to set this up. It's actually really simple compared to setting up from scratch. You just have to do the steps and then it will publish really. You don't have to do too much work to publish your npm package. Right. And there's this documentation thing that compiles the API. So it looks through, it inspects the code and collects all the code comments and the interfaces, and then it appends them here. In this case, there isn't any, so it's not appended. Right, and it also has semantic release for versioning. Right, so you'll notice that the repos version themselves, they're like tagged properly, and then the outcome is so short. There should be a lot more. Yeah. So like every time you merge to master, it will actually make a second commit on master to tag it for release. Right? So you can see all these are all here. And the change logs are also like in here. Right? So I think one thing that isn't in the README, it should be, but it's not, is the commit lint. So commit lint is the thing that checks whether your commit messages are well formatted. So it's very simple. We just do the usual feed : and then you put whatever text you want in there. Then you put your commit message. Right? It's not that complicated. But if the formatting fails, right? If the lint checks the format and it's wrong, and then it will break, then your build won't finish and it won't publish. So that's on purpose to stop you from using bad commit messages. But I think some repos don't have that enabled because it can be a bit annoying. But it's just nice to have if you are using it. So that's this is for libraries. It's not for websites or for APIs. So we have a few repos that are based on this. For example, OA encryption and DNS proof are both based on this. And it's really simple to get started with like a new repo and package. So do use this if you write any libraries. It's very nice. Okay, so then we have React component templates. Actually, I'm not very familiar with these ones. But I was going through the organization just now, and I saw a few of these template repos. So React component template is for publishing React components, I guess. Lauren, do you have anything to add to that? Because that's all I'm going to say.
No, that's it. It's just to create a a component and publish it.
Okay. Is it based on my node repo?
I don't remember. Probably, yeah.
It looks very familiar.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, so this is for React components. So if you are writing components to package into npm packages, you probably want to use that. Then there's a decentralized renderer React template. So that is here. So this is for building decentralized renderers. So like if you want to make a new certificate and then you want to customize a renderer, you can use this one. And then you use Netlify to deploy it. It should be quite well documented because we use this to give to other people to write their own renderers. Right, so this is the decentralized renderer. Then React template, where is it?
There is a filter function in GitHub.
Oh, well, somebody doesn't do work. All right, so this is a React template. So this is for creating React apps. All right, so it has some of the nice things like Tailwind. It also has Krakow.config, which actually we don't need anymore, right? Because the bug that required it has been fixed, so we don't need it. But yeah, it also has like TypeScript and everything, so you don't have to. Wait, there's a new Bible job. I think it's wait, I'll close this. All right. Yeah. So this is the React template. So if you want to make React websites that follow the rest of our what do you call it? Our conventions, you probably don't want to use create React app. You can just straight away use this. Right. That's a TypeScript and then all set up. You don't have to. I mean, create React app has a lot of this, but it's not quite exactly the same as what we have. All right, so that was I think 3 of the templates. There's one more template that doesn't exist yet, which is for the APIs. Right, so I just earmarked this for future work because this is a very simple repo. This is for our faucet. Right, our faucet, all it does is it receives a wallet as a parameter and then it it does something. It's a very simple repo. So this is probably good to follow if you want to write API. I'll tidy up and put it in, make it as a template one day. Maybe not too far in the future. Yeah. So what was I talking about? I wanted to talk about serverless and how it works. So serverless framework, people always talk about infrastructure as configuration, right? So that means that you want to, like in the days before DevOps, when you want to spin up a server, what you do? You go and turn on a machine, like an actual machine, or you go to a hosting provider and you buy a shared hosting or something, right? And then you have to like configure the machine, you do updates and all of that. So we're a bit progressed since then for some people. Right. So we use Serverless Framework, which is a IAC tool that basically you can deploy exactly the same thing multiple times easily. Right? You just have to run like some commands and then you put in some credentials. So in this case, we run serverless deploy. We put in our credentials first, then we run serverless deploy. Right. So we do this with our AWS account, or we use c.run, which helps us to manage this. Yeah, so that way you can like deploy multiple of this, and this is also what enables our preview deploys. Because if deploying is as easy as running a command, then deploying previews is simply just doing that with your changes. So it's nice, right? So inside the serverless .yaml file, it declares all the resources and all the configurations that you need. I'm not going to go into the details because that's going to be a very, very long talk. But if you work with any of these, then you should probably read up on it, right? So that's the declaration, and then you can see all the server stuff that's in here already. So for this particular repo, it's nice because like TypeScript is already set up, like TypeScript, Webpack, everything is set up. You don't have to do all of that on your own, which can be a bit of a pain sometimes. Right. And then when you want to develop these things locally, it's a bit troublesome if you have to deploy it to work on it, right? So what we do is that we have a Serverless Framework has this plugin. It's called Serverless-Offline. Right. So what it does is it tries to emulate what a real deployment should look like, but locally. Right. So that's what gets run when you do npm run dev. So some repos are configured so that it automatically starts up the endpoint. Some aren't. So this is not very standardized for between our serverless repos because we don't have a template. Right. So you might need to start the service first before running tests. Right. So as usual, there's the unit test, and then there's the integration test and end-to-end test. So integration end-to-end generally run against the endpoints and like actually calling the endpoint. So something we have set up for OA functions is that remember the integration test that failed, right? It actually calls it against the deployed endpoint. It fetches the deployed endpoint, the URL, and then it runs the test against it. So that really ensures that you're running against the actual stuff. Yeah. So okay. So yeah. There's a test :CI here that actually runs the endpoint, then runs the test. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a serverless framework. It's quite nice most of the time. Sometimes you have to fight with it, and it's a bit painful. But I promise you, it's easier than running your own services. Okay. And so any questions about serverless frameworks?
I think no question as for now.
Okay. Feel free to ask me anytime if you need to work with it. It's can be a bit confusing with all this different stuff that we have. Okay, and to wrap up, some other infrastructure that we use is one of it is Infura, right? So Infura is an Ethereum endpoint that is do we pay for it? No, we don't. Currently, don't pay for it. Right. So it's they provide like Ethereum nodes. So if you know, we call in our front end we call it Ethereum node, right? So we use ethers.js, which automatically configures which node to call. And I think there are a few different ones in ethers.js, but usually we just think of it as it only uses Infura, which is not true, but generally we think of it as using Infura because that's what it started with. The other ones came in later. Right, so this provides access to the Ethereum state. And another infrastructure that we use, this one we use within between the GovX stuff to share production credentials. For example, our open attestation login, right, and our Ethereum production wallet that's stored in Keybase. So if you need access to it, just let us know. Like somebody who already has access can invite you. Right, so that's what we use because it's an encrypted Git repo, so it's slightly more secure than copying and pasting everywhere. All right. So that's everything that I wanted to cover. All right. Anyone has questions? Okay then. If not, I will hand it over to next guy. Between